everyone, and welcome to the family work. This has been our scene for the last 3 weeks. It started snowing, and we have not been above freezing ever since, so it's not melting. We just got another foot of snow this week, which is actually abnormal for us, and it has just brought all of our work and our projects to a screeching halt. Lincoln had wanted me to do a video that I've been putting off. He wanted me to do a video on why we bought the campground, or how we bought the campground, which are really two different videos. So I'm taking advantage of this snow time to do this. We've finished all of our snow projects. We got the golf carts flipped. We'll have a video on that here shortly. We're just waiting for the snow melt so we can get them out of the garage and sell them. We've been working down at the beach, work on a new attraction for the splash park, and we got that pretty much all prepped and done as much as we can do until the snow melts. So we're just kind of in a standby mode here. So I'm going to try to crank out a couple of videos here that talks about how we purchased a campground, why we purchased a campground. It's actually a really long story to get in all the details. It was over a year-long process, so we're probably going to do a couple multi-part series on that. However, today I just want to let everybody know how we've been blessed to purchase this business, which essentially became quickly a $1 million business. That's not to say we're making $1 million or we're millionaires, but the value of the business is now well above $1 million. And how, if we were to do it all over again, we learned we weren't planning on this, but we actually were able to buy the business essentially for no money out of pocket. And that's kind of what this video is for, is just to explain that to you. So if you are thinking about purchasing a campground or building a campground, this might be relatable. If you're looking at a different kind of business, I'm not quite sure if you'll be able to get as much out of this as from our story as possible, because the unique thing about owning a campground is it's not just an income-based business, but it's also an asset-based business, meaning kind of like anything in real estate. If you have rental properties, you have value from the income from people paying you rent or people staying at the campground, but you also have a tangible asset that has value, and that's appreciating. So when you go to the bank and you want to get a loan for your business, well, if you're manufacturing or producing something or you're a service, it may be a little bit harder to come up with collateral for your bank. However, if you have real estate or if you have hard tangible property assets, then they can use that as collateral, and it makes you a lot less of a risk. So anyways, we went to buy this campground, and this is an existing campground. If you're building one, it's going to be a lot harder because there's nothing there other than the land value. So it's almost more like a construction type loan. However, with this business being an established business, there was a history, albeit very little, a history of income. But more importantly was the value of the land and the improvements on the land. So depending on where your campground is and what type of campground demographic you're looking at, what your market is, most campgrounds have overnight sites. Some people have seasonal sites. Some are completely seasonal. Some are completely overnight. When we bought the campground, was mostly seasonal, and that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just that's what it was. So with seasonal sites, you're collecting all the money up front, and they're getting the site at a discount. Let's just say, for simple math, if you rented a site out to somebody coming in off the street for an overnight for $50 a night, and they're there for a weekend, that's $100 for that site. You do that 4 weekends, that's $400 that site earned you in a month. A monthly gets a discount. So say your monthly site's $500 a month. Well, now it's a lot less of a daily rate, but they're paying for all 30 days, not just for the weekends. So instead of paying $1,500, they're getting for $500. And then a seasonal is your most discounted site, and instead of paying $500 a month for, say, 6 months, they're getting the entire season for maybe $1,500 a month. So really, they're only paying $10 a night, but they're paying for every night of the season. So they're getting a big discount, but they're paying up front, and it's guaranteed money for the season. So you kind of have to see what your demand is. If you can fill up your sites with people who are willing to pay premium for a short-term stay, you're going to make a lot more money doing that. There's also other working factors that go into having people come and go throughout the season versus seasonals who park there once and they're pretty much there for the rest of the year. So when we bought this campground, it was almost 100% seasonal. Rate was really, really low, way below, like the cheapest in the state. That's why the business never made money with the previous owners. However, we knew the potential was there. When the campgrounds nearby were charging twice as much and were full, we knew that there was some room to go with that. There's a lot of deferred maintenance and issues, and we'll get into that in other videos that we had to do. So there was a lot of expense on our part as well, and an investment. However, the campground was almost all seasonal. It was pretty much full. And the timing, that's another thing, is when are you going to close on your loan? So it was a year-long process for us, and most campgrounds, kind of like RVs, people tend to sell in the fall if it's a seasonal campground because they've already collected their money for the year, and they don't want to be there in the spring when all the bills and everything else is due. So same thing with if you bought an RV. If you are ever going to buy an RV, shop in the fall. Everybody's already used it. They're done. They don't want to put it in storage. They don't want to find a place to put it next year. However, if you wait till spring when the weather turns nice, now there's a lot less RVs out there. Everybody's buying them. Same thing with campgrounds. So shop in the fall if you're looking for a campground or an RV. We had this under contract in January, and we weren't able to close. We actually didn't close till the week after it opened in May. There was a couple of issues involved, not on our end, but there was nothing we could do about it. So that being said, it was really hard for us because we didn't have a chance to get to the campground or do anything. We actually essentially bought it sight unseen. We lived across the country, and it's not like a house. You can't renegotiate because, some of the water lines need replaced. I mean, it's either you buy it as is or you don't. So we knew enough. We knew the potential. We saw the location. We knew what was here, what could be here. So we were confident. And then eventually, once closing happened, we had 30% down cash. We had that. But at closing, because the season had already started and the campground was seasonal, the sellers had to bring all the payments and deposits that were due for the season to closing. Well, they weren't really the best at collecting money, so not everybody had paid, and eventually a lot of people didn't even pay that first year. But what they had collected, they brought to closing, and essentially the difference between the down payment on the loan, what my bank required, and what the seller brought in deposits for the season, we were I think it was like $11,000 short on cash. So we had to come out of pocket $11,000. However, the next day, we collected over $25,000 in payments from people who were late paying. So technically, we did have to come out of pocket a couple dollars at closing, but in reality, we bought the campground. We didn't have to come to closing with any cash. Now, we would have never got approval from the bank if we didn't have that cash, but because it was a seasonal campground, because we closed on it at the beginning of the season, and they were bringing all the payments to closing, we essentially bought the campground with no money down. And it even gets better because once we went through the appraisal process, the campground appraised higher than what the sale price was. So we had instant equity. We were able to go back to the bank 3 months later, because there was no residents here at the campground, and we were able to get a home loan based on that equity. And then because the value of the home was increasing the value of the campground, along with some other immediate improvements that we did. First thing, if you ever buy a campground, is put meters on, especially if you have seasonal sites, put electric meters on. So in that investment, decreases our expenses, it increased our income, and it increased the value of the property. So the very next year, we wanted to start doing other projects on the campground. So we already had even more equity, plus we were able to show what additional work we had done and wanted to do. We were able to get yet another loan to finance those improvements. And then a year or two after that, we wanted to do cabins. So we went back to the bank, and because we still, our equity, the value of the campground, both income-based value and asset-based value, was still increasing rapidly. We always had a really good debt-to-income ratio, so we were able to continue to use the equity that we were building to finance our improvements. So we were able to get the cabins, we were able to redo our creamery restaurant, and essentially have never had to put any cash into the campground. And right after we put the house in and did a couple other things, our appraisal was $1 million. Our last appraisal a couple years ago, I think, was 1.3. Now it's probably about 1.6. And with interest rates so low right now, it's really hard not to look at financing more. I'm a big advocate for Dave Ramsey and being debt free. If we didn't do Financial Peace University, we would never have been in a position to purchase the campground originally. We were debt free, and we were very frugal in our spending. That's how we got to this point. But with interest rates so low like this, I mean, if I put say I put a cabin in for $50,000, if I can make $20,000 on that cabin next year, and it's only costing me 2%, 3% to borrow that money, it just seems like a no-brainer. So that's essentially how we bought a $1 million business for no money down. We have put a lot of our personal money into the campground, and we continue. And that's the biggest thing about increasing the value of the campground. We haven't taken anything out of the campground. Every dollar that comes in goes right back into the next project. That was kind of our plan from the get-go, to really build this up to where it could be a business, to where it could be self-sustaining. And we're not quite there yet. But hopefully soon we'll get there. We'll be able to take a step back. We were attracted to the idea of having a seasonal campground in the Midwest because we would have 5 months, 6 months a year just on vacation. And there's campgrounds that are multi-generational. Maybe they inherited from their parents or another family member, and it's established, and that's the lifestyle they live. They can just kind of be on cruise control during the winter. But that's not us. It's just like flipping a house when everything needs to be done, repaired, replaced, and you want to improve on top of that. I jokingly tell people I work more in the winter when we're closed than I do in the summer, just because there's so many projects to do. But this snow right now has totally destroyed my plans for this month. So that's why I'm here talking to you guys. If you want to be self-employed, if you want to start a business, it's a lot of hard work, but I tell you, there's nothing better. I mean, you get the good, bad, the ugly. Today, it was -10 last night, and both of our wells froze up. So right now we don't have water. We're working on it, or I was. I got a heater going right now in there, trying to figure it out where the problem is. But that's what's nice when you clock out or clock in. If something happens at the job, you get to go home. You don't have to worry about it. It's not your problem. But owning a business, it's always your problem. It doesn't matter the time of the day, and it's always on a Friday night is when problems happen, particularly on a holiday. But it's a great lifestyle. The harder you work, the American dream, the more you can prosper. So I wish everybody luck. Feel free to subscribe and let us know if you have any questions or comments. We'll post a couple more videos here detailing the process of how we got into the campground business. But thanks for watching. Have a great day.